Good evening. My name is George Bracy. I am your host for Trans World. And with me this evening, I have a particularly exciting and special guest whose name is Dr. Jackson. And I'll have him introduce himself to you.
Thank you, George. My name is Isaac Jackson, and I am the president of Urban Survivors Union in San Francisco. We're a group of active and former drug users working together to try and change drug policy here in San Francisco. Um, we're connected with two other groups. One's in Seattle and one is in Greensboro, North Carolina. What we do in the city right now is we do community organizing with drug users, and we also have a program where we do special outreach to crack smokers, and where we hand out free harm reduction kits for people who smoke crack on the streets. We do that once a week. Give about 50 kits every Tuesday night. The kits include everything people need to have to smoke crack safely.
So, Dr. Jackson, what is the sole purpose other than just handing out the pipes? What is the overall aim of this service? Is it to offset some kind of social stigma, or is it to align your distribution of free crack pipes with some kind of medical remedy to the pandemic of
Yes,
people using drugs in public?
yes, all of that can be included under the rubric of harm reduction. And harm reduction is a philosophy that believes that uh, we can greatly reduce the harm associated with drug use through interventions. The needle exchange is a really good example of that. Before the San Square needle exchange, drug users had a very high rate of HIV infections. As it stands now, intravenous drug users are the group that has the greatest gains in reducing the spread of HIV because of the needle exchange. In fact, it's one of the few groups that high-risk groups in which the numbers keep going down each year. So harm reduction doesn't wait for people to get clean. I don't like that word very much, but to be abstinent to have effects in their lives. For various reasons, people use drugs. We don't pretend to know or care as an organization why people use drugs. We do care about public health, and we do care that people have the best tools available to use drugs safely. So that's why we do what we do.
So, how does the distribution of free crack pipes help a person who's homeless using in their homeless state? How does that help them come out of homelessness and entertain a better ideation of quality of life? How does that help?
Okay. Well, part of getting out of homelessness has very, very many dimensions to it. But I think if one has a low self-esteem, if one has low self-esteem, it's very hard to want to be housed. And by the way, there are people that we've met who don't want to be housed. They like being on the street, and we respect their choices. But for those who want to get off the street, how does this help? Well, I can't tell you how many times people come up to us and say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And they really care about what we do. They feel loved for the first time. If someone knows that they exist, they took the time to put together these kits for everything they need. They just feel a lot of gratitude. And we don't do this for an ego trip for ourselves, but that's kind of raising their self-esteem up a little bit to know that you're part of society. People care about you. We love you. We want you to be safe. And please take some of these kits and share them with your friends. The other aspect of it is the public health aspect. We want to do outreach to people who normally feel rejected and outside of normal society. So this is a way of saying, hey, you know what? People are starting to care about you guys. If you need to go to a doctor, if We need to talk to a social worker. Maybe you had bad experience 10 years ago, but things are changing. People are understanding that you guys need help. Come on in and talk to people.
So tell me, how does the community powers to be? I'm talking about the other traditional institutions. How do they receive your message and your participation when they are already providing harm reduction services?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we're doing community organizing, and one of our major campaign which trying to get drug users to participate in, it's called Harm Reduction for All. There's been a lot of media and a lot of attention to needles and IV drug users, but there's a whole bunch of other drug users in which there's not programs specifically for them. And so harm reduction for all is trying to make harm reduction umbrella wider and more inclusive to include people. For example, there are people who, different generation of people who grew up recreational drug use being around pills, like oxycodone, things like that. In fact, that's one of the major ways that people die right now who are under 25 is OD on oxycontins and drugs like that. What outreach do we do to those kind of people, to those drug users? Not a lot, except say don't use, which of course we know is not effective for everybody. And we can go into that later, why people use or don't want to stop, which I think is their right to. So for example, in an ideal world, the way we see it, when you go to the needle exchange, it would be an all-purpose kind of place to get all kinds of supplies to use safely, not just needles. You can get a pill crusher, for example, if you want to IV your pills, and other tools that would help you not to OD. Now, someone listening to this might say, "Oh, wow, you're just helping people to OD," but no. When people come and get these tools that they need, also there's literature there about how to use safely, and also literature about how to get clean if people want to get clean. Again, I hate that word, but it's a word that most people know about. So Harm Reduction for All is a campaign in which the crack pipe distribution fits in as well. So basically we want to expand the city's outlook on how to be more inclusive. Now the pushback that we've gotten is that, well, there's no evidence that this is going to help people's public health. And I say, well, if you hang out with the crack users in the street and you see that they have pipes that are really broken, like tiny little pipes like this, because they break during use, but they keep using them, they have burnt lips, and the pipes crack and they cut their lips. And there may not be a lot of research on it, but do we want to wait till we have an epidemic to start helping people out? It seems to common sense that Hep C would be a vector in this a transmission vector in this in the way that people smoke before we start giving out pipes. So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what a little bit of help can do for someone.
Now, I'm a big advocate on harm reduction, and I myself have went out there in the field and distributed pipes and even bagged up the kits with you in your organization. Mm-hmm. So your organization body consists of members who actively use.
Right.
And what kind of pushback do you get with the authorities? I know that the police have often harassed you, because the core of your membership are out there distributing these safe crack pipe kits.
Well, actually, we have not gotten that much pushback from the police. The thing about the police department is they know that the war on drugs doesn't work because they see people being scooped up, they go to jail for a little bit, they rest up, they come back out on the street, and they do the same thing over and over and over again. They know it's a revolving door. In fact, one policeman said to me, the reason why the war on drugs is really bad for us is that people go to prison and they learn new criminal skills. They make them more of a threat to society. So ultimately, we like to see all drugs be decriminalized, and no one should go to prison for drug use. And I think that the district attorney, George Gascon, agrees with us when he speaks about drug use as being um, a public health issue.
Well, I've always said that the drug culture out here in San Francisco was a issue, a public health issue. That it was a throwback to the '60s when the flower the children hate Ashbury was popular,
Right.
and then after that kind of faded away, the season of love kind of faded away. They were left out there in the streets, and the community, talking about the mercantile community, started a campaign that basically had the homeless group from that hippie era running, back and forth to different districts in the city, which helped perpetuate that disparity that those people who were homeless and addicted had to contend with. I remember back then there was a Haight-Ashbury clinic that was doing a lot of harm reduction and a lot of outreach,
Right.
and
I think they're still
specific
open.
to
Yeah.
that community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that changed a lot of people's attitude toward drug use was the HIV/AIDS epidemic, because HIV could easily be transmitted from people sharing needles, and so if we wanted to stamp out this epidemic, we had to confront drug use in a way that was more than just being punitive. In fact, the idea of handing out needles really originated in Europe, the Netherlands and Germany, because they noticed right away that heroin users or junkies or whatever word you want to use had a high prevalence of HIV even before the virus was isolated and identified. So San Francisco led the nation, and also up in Seattle, in terms of, and New York City eventually too, because there's just so many people getting HIV. It's very easy to prevent it by giving people clean needles. And I think that was the beginning of harm reduction and change of attitude in the city. It was a very successful program, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that with crack smokers, we don't have the research. No one has cared enough to do the research. Is there a high prevalence of Hep C among crack users? And how do they get it? Is it from sharing crack pipes or not? There's been one study in North America, in British Columbia. They have a similar program up there where they hand out harm reduction kits for crack smokers. And while the research around the disease transmission is not definitive, they do have one finding which they say is definitive, and that is that the number of burns on people's lips has gone way down. And I think that's significant because any public health department, worth its salt, would want to reduce burns in its population.
So I understand too that the problem with the whole problem with the ideation of it is that there's competing services, and crack smokers are people. The visibility of these people are those that are homeless or those that are contained in districts like the Tenderloin and the Mission and South of Market.
Right.
And those are the three hotspots with the highest population. But then there are others who participate, in this use, but they're sheltered and living inside a bubble.
People of means.
Yeah, people of means who are
Right.
sheltered and living inside the bubble.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic and empathetic to your cause, but tell me, what makes you think the city is going to get on board with this?
Well, the city hasn't. Our program is funded through private donations. No one's getting paid. We're all volunteers. And we can only do one night a week because of that. We would love to get support from the city so that we could do more than one night per week. Now, I've talked to public health officials, And I realize that they have political bosses. They have to answer to the general public. However, there's two things I want to say about that. Number one, the needle exchange, when it first started in the early '90s, was just as controversial. But we've seen the results, and it's been worth taking some heat for it. The second thing is that I you know if the city doesn't want to buy crack pipes, I understand that. I understand that it would be a huge political and publicity nightmare for them. It's already when we first started doing this, we created we generated a lot of um, public interest nationwide about our program. And the city got kind of boxed into a corner by the media, and that's unfortunate. So I think for the time being, having San Francisco buy crack pipes is out of the question. But that's okay. We have already um, have found ways to fund it ourselves. We can do that. But what we'd like to get is more support for other things, that we can be a bridge for crack smokers to public health services in the city, because the people out that we've been reaching out to, they know us, they trust us. We have an in on, in terms of their lifestyle a little bit. I myself, I'm not a crack smoker. I didn't know a lot about crack smoking, but I've learned a lot about what's going on. And in fact, the fact that I don't smoke crack, I think, and they know that just the way I talk to them, it's a benefit, because they see someone who's not of them but cares about them, and that could be a symbol of, like, hey, maybe the city can open up and get more health services to people like that. So maybe the city can work with us, like have a van or a health person with us to give people referrals or checkups, or things like that.
Yeah, I remember when the city had MAP, Mobile Patrol Assistance Program, with the Osmond Center over there on Suffolk Market, where they would go out late night and patrol
Mm-hmm.
the street, even during the day,
Mm-hmm.
but mainly late night, patrolling the streets and underpasses for people who were inebriated, drunk, and or under the influence, and they used to bring them to the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't see that service being provided in the community anymore. And also, I kind of like to think that this practice of what you're doing would kind of help navigate these chronic users, these complex, homeless, addictive participants into some form of a sustainable mental health, behavioral recovery,
Mm-hmm.
reduction, harm reduction. All of this is you're addressing public safety issues. You know, and I believe that the distribution of free crack pipes is a public safety issue
Mm-hmm.
and a public health issue,
Mm-hmm.
and it should be viewed as such. But because of the fact that the high visibility of the people out there indulging in this, they're black and people of color, marginalized people, people without any dignity or any sense of self worth. They're alienated, dispossessed, and
Mm-hmm.
ostracized,
Mm-hmm.
and conflicted. So, they're stuck in that rut.
Well,
And some of those social service agencies, they're like lemons. They're not, if
mm-hmm.
you're looking at apples and oranges, I consider a lot of them lemons because they're not addressing the issue. They're perpetuating the
Yeah.
problems. And I look at them as being cash cows.
Well, we like to call it the nonprofit industrial complex, similar to the military industrial complex, i.e., a group of organizations and people and philosophy which perpetuate the same old. Now, there are people who work in these organizations who really mean well. Many of them are friends of mine, and they do good work. But one thing is missing from their work is the input of drug users themselves and what they want, and then implementing what they want as best they can. So that's one thing that we're doing with Urban Survivors Union, my organization, is collectively trying to decide among ourselves what we want, and then bringing it to policymakers and bringing it to organizations. And when we can't get what we want, then we try and do it on our own, like the crack pipe thing. The crack pipe program was originally going to hopefully be. We naively thought the city would help us, and the city did not at the time. So we decided to do it ourselves to show that the world's not going to fall apart if drug users hand out crack pipes to other drug users. All hell will not break loose. And so we've done it for over a year now. Now, there's one thing about the demographics. I know that African Americans have an image that we are the overwhelming majority of the crack users. But we've been taking numbers, demographic numbers. We write down no names or anything like that, but we just keep track of the gender of the people we give pipes to, and their ethnic or racial background. And while I would say 50% of the crack pipes are given to African American males, the other 50% is divided fairly evenly between white males, black females, and Latinos.
So, with that being said, how can uh, the existing networks of services embrace that theory
Well,
and incorporate a similar practice in their method of distributing services?
well, first of all, the groups I just mentioned, black males, and white males, and Latino males. Um, I would say most of the people we meet are low income, not people with means, are mostly outside of the healthcare services. I would guarantee you that the majority of people that we meet don't have a primary care physician. And so maybe out of our program can develop some sort of clinic for people who are crack users. That's open at certain times of the week, and where people can come in and feel like, it's okay. Doctors know you smoke crack. You can talk about your crack use and how it might affect your health, and maybe get resources to housing if they want, things like that. And also we want as a collective group to see more research done on this issue. It's about time. It's a shame that no one's done any research on the health effects of crack beyond the mental, so-called delirium and binge using and all that stuff like that. But what about day-to-day factors in terms of how do people, what's the quality of people's lives? And one more thing I want to say about that in terms of quality of people's lives is that very often the thing that causes the most harm for drug users is not the drug itself, but how we relate to drug users, how we stigmatize them. If someone's going to instantly lose their job or lose their apartment because people find out that they're drug using, that's what happens very often. It's not so much the drug. When you see people on the street, it's not so much that their drug use has got them on the street, but they got kicked out of their apartment or their subsidized housing, whatever, because they're drug users. So when we say harm reduction and reducing the harm associated with drug use, we also have to include the harm associated with our social attitudes and also our mass incarceration of people. It's very hard to get a job if you've been jailed many times. And back in the day, people regularly get picked up for smoking in the street, things like that. So we want a more comprehensive and intelligent approach. Because look, the people that are on the street who smoke, people on the street who do any drug, there are a small minority of people who have tried these drugs. Most people will try these drugs and go like, okay, that was fun, but I can't go to work, so I can't do it. But for various other reasons, the small minority of people become regular users, and I think that's because there's some underlying condition, whether it's a dual diagnosis with some mental illness, or whether it's some trauma in their life. A lot of people are veterans who have gone through traumatic things. In fact, people are predicting that another 10 years there's going to be a whole new wave of homeless people from the Afghan and Iraq wars. People who just, have, snap, or not snap, but just, it catches up with them, what they went through. Because a lot of people who are now in their 60s and 70s, who are in the street, chronic homeless, sometimes they're not all of them, of course. I'm not trying to say all veterans, have problems, but some veterans, in this chronic homeless are, ex-veterans, and the government has finally realized that and done really amazing things to get them housed. And so I guess what I'm saying is that it's a combination of things, and we have to work together as a society to solve this problem. If of drug use harming people, we've overemphasized the drug use itself and not emphasized the human being that's being affected. Because I always say, okay, if drugs are really bad for you, then when you see a drug user, you should hug them, or not hug them, at least not beat them up and arrest them. Because you already said this is a hard life because they're using drugs, then to see what you can do to help them. And that's kind of where we're coming from, Urban Survivors Union.
I myself have been a crack user, and I was also a binger. I mean, one rock wouldn't do it. It'd be a quarter ounce or half ounce, and I would literally lock myself up in an apartment. I've never been homeless under the influence of any kind of substance, but I've always had provided a roof over my head and made sure I had a practice of making sure my bills were paid, making sure there was food in the house, and making sure I had all the necessary party treats to go along with the drug, the choice, or the combination of drugs. And I would lock down for 30 days or more and go on a binge and do it until there was no more to be done, and lay down for a week or two, maybe 3 weeks, and get back up and start the process all over again. And that, but then again, I had a propensity for that. Not just for crack, but for all substances and alcoholic beverages. And I attribute a lot of that to early childhood abuse, trauma. I'm PTSD documented, so I could attribute that to the fact that the service allowed and catered to addiction and alcoholism, violence, all forms of sexual improprieties. So, so it was like I had a license and a right and felt entitled to be a practicing drug users for over a period of 10 or 20 years or more. But at the same time, I did not get my recovery or any of that through the traditional institutions. I got mine from the streets. I got mine from participating in some of these community collectives, some of these community outreach facilities. I would even recommend
the community groups.
I would even recommend your organization. I mean, I learned a lot by participating with you. I've seen I looked in the eyes and listened to the voices of those who I were handing pipes onto. I've heard them, express appreciation and tell us that lives were being saved and no one died that night behind an issue of not having a pipe, the availability of one, or any kind of mishap that occurs when you're under that influence. And that's very empowering. And I can't understand why one organization or several or multiple organizations would have a high of interest in pursuing a legislation or funding for needle exchange or meth numbers and HIV prevention and ignore crack.
Okay. I think that it's very similar in some ways, in the way that, say, in minority communities, healthcare and education and other things are not as well funded as other parts of the city. Sometimes it's out of ignorance, it's benign neglect, and I think that people don't realize. See, the worst kind of pushback is when people don't know they're pushing back. You know what I mean? When you try and confront them and say like, "Hey, this doesn't feel fair to me. This feels like it's some not discrimination." Because the worst thing you can say to someone is like, "You're discriminating." People, oh no, not me. I'm like, you just tracked me. You said something's wrong with me. Which is in and of itself is a barrier. I mean, we have to get real and have to say, hey, you know what? We have to have a real conversation here. We have a real conversation about how come these organizations have very few people of color working for them. How come the drugs that we reach out to are familiar to a certain generation or a certain cultural group. And again, I'm not saying that it's a zero-sum game. I'm not trying to take away from the Needle Exchange. I think they do great work. All I'm saying is that we want to expand the tent. We want to have similar services for everybody. Now crack has been, you know, first of all, we live in a drug-infused society. So if people forget that alcohol is a drug, and so in every street corner you can go and buy alcohol in certain areas. So we cannot start from a position of drugs are bad, because every day I would say the majority of Americans take some drug every day, whether it's caffeine or beer at night or cigarettes or vaping or any of these things that are like illegal that surround us. And then if that doesn't work, you go to your doctor and ask for a prescription for something. Either antidepressants or, I mean, and that's fine. I think that drugs are a technology that we can use to make people feel better. The thing that really disturbs me about beating up on drug users or ignoring their plight is that drug users very often for example, let's say that 80% of the women who are chronic homeless and drug users have some sort of trauma in their past, most likely sexual trauma. People use drugs to blot that out, and sometimes they don't even know what they're blotting out. But who are we to say we weren't there to stop that crime years ago? Who are we to say don't blot that out now? Deal with reality. Well, where were we 20, 30 years ago when this person was going through, personal hell? So I think that compassion has to underlie almost all of our work with drug users because, I like to think that here in San Francisco at least we're compassionate people, compassionate community, and it's a tradition that's been here for a while and we want to continue despite all the major changes. And I think that people the new immigrants to the city are wanting to be compassionate as well. I think we can come up with some ways that we can help people out. But it has to start with some sort of respect and saying that, okay, this may not be for me, but if this is going to make you feel better, if this is what you want, we're gonna help you achieve that. So then you can make your decision or not whether this is really what you want. Maybe people need to get what they want to realize that's not what they really want. But if you keep people from actualizing their desires and keep telling people no, you're wrong, then we'll never get anywhere. It'll be the same thing over and over and over again. So that's kind of where we need to have a real dialogue in this. And for another example is, can you imagine, like, say, the city saying, we want to have comprehensive health care for women, but there are no women working in an organization. Or they never ask women, like, what do you want? What are your healthcare issues? That would be, people would say, no, we want to have some control of this policy. We want to have some input to this policy. And that's where drug users are at right now. But, to be fair, the war on drugs is one of the main reasons why we're so behind in our thinking about drug use. It's been a nightmare for 40 years, perpetuated by the DEA and the Justice Department. And President Nixon started this 40 years ago. Just lock everybody up, to say no. We're just coming out of this. I heard President Obama say recently that mass incarceration is a problem, and we need to stop wasting money on locking people up, and that money can be used other ways, more you know, be used in a more useful manner. So these major change never happens overnight. It's going to be slow, and so Urban Survivors Union and our members, I think we're all in it for the long haul. It may happen in our lifetimes, it may not, but we just want to know that we've kind of helped things along the way. And think I'm convinced that eventually crack pipes will be given out free in the city. Maybe next year, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, but it's going to happen.
Well, I'm tired of hearing users of any substance being demonized and vilified and criminalized. When you have liquor stores and grocery stores that are selling alcoholic intoxicants of every manufacturing degree of potency. And they're not demonized, vilified, or criminalized. And people are being regulated to a position, a status of not even second class citizens, but a caste system where they're just totally invisible and don't exist.
I call them dispossessed.
And totally dispossessed and devalued.
Mm-hmm.
And it's represented in their income insecurities, their food insecurity, their quality of life insecurity, their medical insecurity. I mean, insecurity multiple chronically abounds in this society. And what really frustrates me about San Francisco, and I'm one of those that couldn't access services, not because I was a veteran. I couldn't even access services during the apex of them renovating the VA facility, let alone hiring outsourcing services and medical equipment, but importing technicians and practitioners. I remember that back in the early 80s when the VA facility was managed by peers, veterans. I'm talking about veterans that was employed as civil servants. And the same with the city hall. There were black men when I came here that was employed at City Hall.
Right.
And at 850, right, but now you don't see none of that. There was all kind of services available that's not available anymore. And I'm wondering if they're talking about Black Lives Matter and compassionate services, why are you reversing your trend? Why are the board of supervisors advocating more police when it's proven that the crime rate is down? And why are they misappropriating money to services that is not applicable to what the community needs? And then why are they not supporting mental health, peer-based, community-based organizations? I remember that's how Swords, when it was on Waller Street back in the day, became what they are today. And the advent of the AIDS Foundation. As far as I'm concerned, they're not doing what they were mandated to do.
Well, without getting into specific organizations because Urban Survivors Union, we're open to working with anybody that wants to work with us. So I don't want to criticize anyone specifically, but I will say this: there's an us and them mentality, and also that'll never happen to me. Now, I have a PhD from a fairly major institution in the United States, and when I graduated and moved to San Francisco, if you said that I would, be a drug user and I would crash and burn and I'd end up on the street for a short period of time, I would say you're racist, you're crazy, you're stupid. It's never happened to me. I have a PhD. Shit happens. Stuff happens. And out of that turmoil, I decided when I got my head back together again and I came out to the other side of it, that my career was pretty much gone in the field I studied in. But I thought, hey, wait a minute, I have a lot of skills from my life as an academic and a researcher. I know a lot about the drug scene from being part of it. I think there's something I can do to make this not a complete washout for me. And so I slowly started developing insights into harm reduction and things like that, and starting organizations and working with other drug users for a more positive outcome. So so the reason I bring this up is that needle exchange programs, even though the AIDS Foundation has been doing needle exchange for 20 years now, because neighborhoods are changing, some people don't want needle exchange anymore to be in the neighborhood because people are gentrifying, and it's ironic that they'll move into a neighborhood and say, "Oh, the rents are really cheap here. Let's buy this building and turn it into condos, and then we'll sell it. When we sell it, we'll have a lot of money because we'll get it cheap and then we'll sell it for a lot of money." But then suddenly they notice that the needle exchange is happening on their block, and then they want it to go away. And it's like, well, wait a minute. The reason why you got this building really cheap was because it was an undesirable neighborhood. And drug users didn't care whether you moved in or not, but we were here first. So why are you going to throw us out when we were providing services, healthcare for people that may be one of the few health interventions that they have? And so that's something that it's affecting a lot of people because if these new neighbors succeed in shutting needle exchange down, then we're back to square one. HIV rises again. In fact, the city has not really gotten a big handle on HIV, the spread of HIV. Numbers are still going up in high-risk groups. So at the same time that people are saying, oh, the crack pipe thing is too radical, the numbers are showing that something has to be radical because it's not working what we're doing right now.
I've always said, and I still say, you have to be comprehensively proactive and radical in your approaches to anything social. I'm a product of affirmative action, the CEDAR program, and I crashed and burned because of the policies surrounding eligibility for those programs. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had a good upbringing, up and coming paraprofessional value employable member of society, but I just could not play that game. Mm-hmm. The numbers, the statistics. There's a course of action that the providers have to demonstrate to the governing sponsors, and you have to meet criteria. You have to measure up to their standards and their expectations. And free thought and flexibility was nowhere in the game plan. I couldn't play that. Coming out of Vietnam and, I couldn't, the reality of, hell, I can't do this. This ain't free education. I came up under the GI Bill. Education for services rendered. Everything they say is free or comparable or economically viable or community value. No, it's not so. It's all political, and and it works to your disadvantage. So, I'm all for being radically comprehensive in your approaches to
Right.
redeeming and individuals, and also incorporating significant uh, services, that's going to benefit uh, the people that they're targeted for. I can't tolerate too much more of this abuse of children. I mean, we have teenagers who are unemployed, no sense of purpose, uh, with their babies. I mean, um, they're not even in a position to sustain anything for themselves economically, and they got responsibility of raising another child
Right.
without what? Without any resources.
Right.
Then they have undisclosed issues going on,
Yeah.
chronic poverty. Come on. And then they're on top of that, they're using substances. Where is uh, uh, um, the
What's the
organizations that's supposed to be
Right.
helping these people? Where
Well,
are they, and what are they doing with all that money?
well, maybe the organizations don't exist yet. Maybe we have to create them. And also, for Urban Survivors Union, being radical means also for us. It means working with whoever wants to work with us. If the CDC said they wanted to work with us, we work with them. If the Republican Party said they want to work with us, we work with them. I mean, certain issues. Which I think, for instance, the Republican Party, they have more people in Congress who are senators who are looking at the drug war than the Democrats do. Even though the Democrats get all the support from African Americans, I don't want to get into all that level of politics, but it's kind of ironic that the Democratic Party has done so little for African Americans in terms of the war on drugs. It's starting to change, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you. But we have to. To me, radical means that you work with. It changes from day to day, from year to year. Who's ally, who's not, because sometimes people who sometimes one thing I've learned from my academic work is that a part of it was kind of anthropological, and everyone in the world has a worldview that they think is how can I say it is whole. Every person has a world. You couldn't make it to the world. Everyone has a worldview, a philosophy about the world, but we don't all agree. But we're forced to accept the philosophies and worldviews of certain people, and if we don't fit into that, then you're powerless or you're out. We need to create a society where we listen to each other and try to understand how our worldviews conflict and also coincide. And I think we can develop out of that. We can develop more of a flexible culture, a culture where, because to me, to see all the people that are homeless, and see them, so many of them are a certain group of people, then the powers that be should automatically know we're doing something wrong. And what could it be? None of those people work for us. Maybe, and because the thing about affirmative action and diversity and all that stuff is that I looked at that a lot when I was in grad school. One of the biggest problems about that issue is people give lip service to it, but they don't take it seriously. Until diversity is as important as the mission of your organization, then it's never going to happen. So when people say, "Oh, we can't find qualified people," well, wait a minute. If you're if you think if diversity is really important for your organization, and someone is it just meets almost like 9 out of 10 of your qualifications, you should hire them, Because if you don't hire them, then you don't have diversity. That means you don't take it seriously. You take these other things seriously, but you don't take diversity seriously. And then these people can be trained. The one other thing they're lacking, then give them the training. It's not like if you have all these things, then you're not a genius. You just had the opportunity to learn it. They haven't. You know.
Yes, I agree because I'm a big advocate on diversity, and you're right, they do play lip service, not just out here in San Francisco, but everywhere I've been in the United States. They do play lip service to it. They're not serious. They're not serious about embracing diversity in all its entirety. What I kind of find out is they're cherry picking. You know, if you can enhance their program or further their agenda, then you're on board.
Or you just like them, but you're darker.
Right. So they don't want. Now I've been told, "Oh, you interview well, but you're not a good fit." I don't know what a good fit is unless you're talking about size, a shoe size. You know, and I don't ascribe to labels.
Yeah, so that means they don't take diversity seriously, because then if they don't hire you, then they don't have diversity.
Right, and so my thing is, diversity is like a rainbow. You know, if you look at the prism of the rainbow, there's all kind of diverse shades, diverse pigmentations, and all that. So, you know, no, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
When I hear that, you know, I cringe. It makes my skin crawl because I know, oh God, here comes another challenge oh God, I'm not even really, do I have to deal with this today? You know, and so, you know, that's how I look at it.
Well, that's why Urban Survivors Union, we're trying to create an organization that all drug users feel welcome. And even among ourselves, it can be challenging. So I'm not saying that diversity is difficult. It's not easy for anyone to do, but we've got to do it if we want to have equality in our society. For example, in our organization, we have issues with because people are homeless, because people have different issues, crises in their lives. So people tend to come and go. Then they may be active for 3 or 4 months, and then they become homeless and they can't come. That's fine. When they come back, we don't go treat them like, oh, you were supposed to be at this meeting and you didn't come here, and how come you didn't come here? Like, we welcome them back and understand that, you know, stuff happens. Some organizations would not tolerate that. They would say, wait a minute, you were supposed to be here. It's just, I mean, we have our own, we have standards too. I mean, if you sign up for a volunteer shift, only thing we say to people, if you don't come to it, just call us and let us know you can't make it. No call, no show, it just leaves everyone hanging. That's the bottom line. And you know, but we don't kick them out of our organization. We just say, okay, well, then you can't be a main volunteer. You can come when you can, and we'll have someone else take their responsibility to actually be there, and that's fine. And let people know when you're ready to handle that, you can try it again. Now that may seem like ultimate, like all liberal, like, you know. But yet we have an organization which is you know, has all kinds of, you know, we have men, women, trans people, gay, straight. It's you know, and it's not easy getting there, but we do get there.
So how different is this organization of yours compared to the other urban survivors across the country? I know you told me a while back that you have attended some
Conferences?
Conferences, yes.
Yeah.
And that you suggested that I should attend one.
Yes.
I'm seriously considering it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What's so uniquely different about this program here of yours as opposed to the ones across the country?
Okay, well, first of all, people should know that there is a drug user activist and organizing movement in the country, and in New York and Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, San Francisco, of course. I think LA is coming together. I'm not sure, but these are. We're not the only. In other words, we're not the only community organizers who are drug users. There are other people. One thing that makes us unique is that we've learned from the last 10 years or so of organizing that one thing we felt really strongly was important was to have our own board directors, our own 501c3, because in the past we've used other organizations to be a conduit for donations and grants and stuff like that. So not only did we lose 10% of the money when we give someone else become our sponsor, but then whoever controls the money controls the organization. And so we've lost control of organizations in the past because our sponsors didn't like what we were doing or didn't want to hack it or whatever, and fired people or took away people's keys and locked them out and stuff like that, which is antithetical to what we're trying to do because we're trying to make all drug users feel welcome. Um, so we worked really hard on Survivors Union to get our 501c3, and I think we were the first organization of drug users to get that from the IRS. Um, now, that also means a lot of responsibilities, and it's great. And also, I've learned a lot. I mean, having 501c3 is easier said than done, but once you get it, there's all these things you have to do in minutes and paperwork and all that stuff, which is great because look, how else are we going to learn this? Okay, my vision is like 10 years from now, someone's going to be able to apply to be a head of a foundation and say, I had this experience because I've done this before. And I'm managing my drug use in a way that allows me to do this. And that's going to be a breakthrough, you know. But we can't get there unless we have our own organizations, because no one's going to allow us to be treasurer, no one's going to allow us to be secretary or any of those important positions until we do it ourselves. So part of what we do, not only do we organize people, but within our own organization, we're doing career development, not career development, but skill development.
That's very good. You know, I find that that's the trend for a lot of radical, out of the loop, under the radar organizations, grassroots, peer-based organizations. And that speaks to the reality of what the real world looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Right.
you know, I applaud those efforts, and I'm a participant in community-based organizations that are under the radar. So, so we come to the close of our program. And any last parting words you have to say?
Well, I just want to say
thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show, and I really appreciate it. Hope the word gets out. Urban Survivors Union. If you want more information about us, you can email us at info@urbansurvivorsunion, that's one word, .org.
Thank you again, and thank you, viewing public, for this opportunity to come before you on this day with this controversial issue. Give it some thought, and become a participant. You're not only saving lives, but you're also presenting a service to your community. With that, I'm out.